is on the, well, she's not, we don't have to take notes, but I'll take notes for just general purposes. Who are we waiting for? Laurel?
I don't see her here.
I don't either. No, I don't see her yet. And I don't see Chris Darby either.
Yep. I hear furiously.
Gonna say somebody's typing like mad.
That's me, sorry.
I
Getting an
can't
email
type-
out while
well,
I
I can
can.
type that fast, but it's just gibberish.
Hey, Charles,
Yes.
quick question. I probably should know this, but is the budget posted to the website, Portland School's website?
I believe Meg has it now. I'm not sure if it's on there yet. Meg and I talked about that today.
Okay.
It may not be up there, or it may be. Wasn't sure if she got it done today.
I guess my
It
second.
will be soon.
Okay. My secondary question is that is it your intention tonight, as we talk about sections, to actually show them, so not only we could see them, but maybe members of the public?
Good question.
More of that, because I think as people attend, we're the only ones that have the information. And they don't know what we're talking about, so.
It is
have to figure
uploaded
out a
on
way
the
to get-
website.
Is it this most recent with the PVLA sections or without the PVLA sections, Stephanie?
It's the presentation.
Okay, yeah. I think what Dave's asking for is, do we have the
document.
enrollment numbers up there?
No, I meant the budget,
Oh,
sorry.
yeah, he said budget.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, so Stephanie, it is on there. I could take a look.
Yes, I'm
Let's
just
see what we
looking.
got
It's the
here.
presentation you did last week. So it goes through all the accounts.
Okay, I just looked quickly, to be honest with you, and I couldn't find it, so I don't know how people are looking for it, could find it.
Yeah, budget information. I think it's under the quick links. Let's see. Yes, it's under the quick links. Right on the
Oh, yeah,
homepage
budget
there, which
information, yep.
looks beautiful now with all the red. I like the red there. And then right under the quick links, it
Superintendent's-
says
yeah,
budget
it's right
information.
there. Yeah. And
Oh, okay,
looks like, and the link.
Yeah, Dave, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about, if we were talking about sections, the enrollment numbers that are certainly sensitive to the FTE. I thought maybe that's what you're talking about. I don't think that's in the presentation, but I have them here and I'm prepared to talk
Yeah.
about them. Whether we could display them might be a little complicated, but
okay. Oh,
can,
good.
But all the presentations there and the actual budget summary are both there. Oh, Sharon, we can't hear you.
you're muted. Sharon,
I
yeah.
know. That's what I was saying. I was hoping somebody was reading my lips. I'm muted. Can't talk. Okay. Okay, are we ready to call the meeting to order? I see
think
everyone
so.
is here. Hi, Chris, Laurel.
Hi.
Glad you made it in.
I was trying to just call Chris. I think I got Carrie on the phone, Chris. So just tell her I was calling.
Okay.
It was really strange. I had to like close out and reload. It looked like the meeting was not, I was sitting waiting and it looked like the meeting hadn't even started. It's not happened to me before. It was strange, but I'm here.
All right, so we will get going.
All right.
First on the agenda are
Call to order.
introductions.
7:04. Okay.
Okay,
Go ahead.
I'm Sharon Peters, the Chair of the Board of Ed, and Dr. Britton is here. Item number 2 is public comment. Are there any public comments, either by email, Charles, or people in the
I did
meeting
not
would like to
receive any
speak?
email comments. Do we have any public comments, Dylan or Lila? Oh, I'm getting the finger. Hang on. We might. Nope, no public comments.
No,
Okay.
not this time.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So next is questions and answers. And what I'd like to do is kind of go round robin, let everyone begin with asking a question and see where we go from there. Kim, would you like to go first?
Sure, I can go first. I sent a couple of questions kind of last minute, and I appreciate you, Charles, responding as quickly as you did. One of the questions I had was, looking at the positions and looking at some of the increases, and I know you did a lot of work to balance that out. And I had a community member who reached out about our equity coordinators, the 2 stipends that we created, and the alliance, I think it's Gay Straight Alliance position. And the question was, gee, why did the board do that if we don't have a lot of money? And I was thinking that was something we were required to do from a state mandate. But then when I followed up with you, that's not the case, right?
Mandate that we have equity coordinators. No. Those positions there, I wish I had looked. I think there were $1,500 stipend positions.
Right. I think that's what they
For the
were. I'm
two-
pretty
the
sure
two.
that's right. Right.
Yeah.
And they were part of our goals as a board to create equity and to follow through on what we thought was critical for social emotional learning for students. Is that pretty much frames it? And we added
Yes,
them
we,
in
we
this
set-
year. We
Right.
we
set a
found the money
goal.
in this year's budget, and now this is to continue them on into the next budget year, right?
Correct. Yeah, we have our goal 4 is to strategically review all systems with the goal of increasing equity, advancing social justice, and fostering civil discourse amongst all Portland Public School stakeholders. So
Right.
the equity coordinators are, I'm really excited about the work that they're doing already, and much more information to come for you as we begin this work this year, for sure.
And one of the
Eric Martin
questions,
is,
sorry, go ahead and finish.
go ahead, Tim. Yep.
Well, one of the questions that came to me is that, especially with the equity coordinators, is this kind of is it redundant because the Board of Selectmen created their own solidarity task force with the idea that there'd be some interaction with the school as well? And my thinking was that these equity coordinators and the task force that Eric's creating is much more, it's very tightly focused on our policies and going through those policies and our curriculum and recommending changes. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, that's completely accurate. The task force for the town, they're focused on, town activities and our locus of control is the schools. So our equity coordinators and Eric and the work that we're engaging in is focused exclusively on what's happening pre-K through 12. Certainly there are plenty of opportunities for us to liaison and align our efforts, but they're 2 separate groups, one focused on more town-wide matters and one focused on the schools. That's sort of our lane.
Right, yeah, thank you. And then the other question I had was in terms of Eric's proposal for the one-to-one technology and the leasing is, and I know you already answered this in an email for us, that, you know, are there a lot of other schools that are doing this? Do we have examples throughout Connecticut? And I think you said Weathersfield. I think he knew for a fact that Weathersfield was doing the leasing. And we weren't sure about others. And I think as we go forward, maybe if we could find out more schools that do that. I mean, I was on the one-to-one technology committee, well, on the policy committee when we first were working on the one-to-one technology, when Jim Tripp was on the board at that point, and he was a strong advocate for that. And we, we created, and you created for us, Charles, the life cycle plan that we had in place. And that's always the issue, is the ability to continue forward with that. And in government, that happens all the time. We make a great plan to keep the technology current and keep it useful and keep it moving, and then we don't fund it and we don't replace the technology, and we leave everybody struggling with failing technology, and it doesn't live up to its potential for us and learning. So I think the leasing, I think that's a nice idea, and I think it's something we should really look at, and understanding more other towns that do it would be helpful. So that was my only two things I had. Well, I will say one other thing while I still have the floor. Just the documents that you put together and that you have shared, and the summaries about the spending and the increases and the changes, in all my years on the board, I've never seen a set of documents come out of the gate that were as thorough and helpful and explanatory as what you guys, you and Stephanie, put together for us this year. I just bar none, and thank you for that.
Thanks, Tim.
But I just want to make sure that that's the whole leadership team right there. That's all the building principals and department area people. That reflects as much on their due diligence. So I appreciate you saying that, and I'm glad they heard you say that. But I want to make sure that credit goes to those folks for sure.
Oh, well, good. Thank you to all of them.
Lauren?
I'm going to pass on questions for right now. That's not true. I have a lot of questions, I think, specifically about the Chromebook program. Yeah, I think I'd rather yield to somebody else for now, if that's okay.
Mr. Murphy?
Yeah, I only have a couple questions here. I'll start out with my typical speech that I've given every year, is that we do a great job of putting this budget together, and there's not a lot of fluff. And although it looks like a little higher increase than most people would want, 1-2% or being flat, the reality is that there's the salaries and the medical, unfortunately for all of them, going up every year. And I did a quick calculation. That's 84% of the proposed increase is just in the salaries and medical benefits, or benefits in total. So what's left is basically the necessities. So, if we cut anything else out, then we're basically cutting out something that someone has said, I need this to do a good job. I don't see any fluff in here. The only question I did have, and this is more of a clarification, because I don't know if you can comment on it or not, but I asked this the last time, was on the transportation, it says that it's up 1.8%, but your comment is we're working on a negotiation of a 2% increase. So does that mean in some other area we're seeing a decrease, or is that part of what we negotiated for this year? I'm a little bit confused. So I guess if maybe you can clarify, what goes into that number, being where it's at.
That would be the purchase services
And
line, right? Is that what you mean, Dave?
Yeah.
But
I just want to be, Stephanie, you should answer that, but I just want to be careful that probably if we're going to talk about an ongoing negotiation, we might want to do that in an executive session. But Stephanie, certainly talk about the 1.8 and how you're you came to that.
So
Well,
it's,
excuse me. I think what we need to look at is that line item for purchase services, right? If we're negotiating
It's
contract. I don't
transportation.
necessarily want to talk about the negotiations, just how you, I guess, same thing that Charles said, just how you came to that final increase.
I
number.
think, Dave, you're talking about 51010, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So on top of our regular transportation, it's also including the special ed transportation. It includes the athletic transportation, and it includes our displaced student transportation as well as activity transportation. So we did see decreases in other areas. So that's what kind of
Oh, it nets
makes
out.
that a little bit lower, yeah.
Okay.
And we
so-
had to make cuts in certain places, so
Yeah.
that was one of them.
Yeah, sometimes it's just nice to point out to, people that may be watching is that, we spend a little over $1 million just to get our kids into the school system and out of the school system. So people don't realize that things like that cost money. So that's about all I had. Again, I think it's a very condensed, consolidated budget. There's not a lot of things that I'd say are dreams and hopefuls. There's a lot of stuff that is needed. And I don't see where we could really cut much, if anything, to be honest with you. Although we probably will have to at some point, as we know the
Yeah.
process is the way it goes every year, is that we're asked to come back with a lower number. So I guess we need to anticipate that. But that's all I have.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Meg?
I looked at the budget quite frequently in the last, since we got it. I have two questions, and basically I'm going to cut to the chase because I think there isn't any fluff in this budget. And 3.97, when we went with that last year and thought we were in pretty good shape to be able to ask for a higher increase, we ended up with much less. What would you cut if the Board of Selectmen looked at this budget today and said, you've got to come up with 2% of this budget? Because obviously, you've put it together hoping that 3.97 will fly, but I think you and Stephanie probably in reality know that we have some cuts, and you probably have already anticipated some. So could you speak to some of those things that we would be cutting? And I know this cuts to the chase and takes us out of line items, but I don't see any. I see a lot of zero increases across the lines. I don't see any extra. So what's your plan B?
Sure. I'm glad you asked the question, and Stephanie and I have been doing some sort of gaming out of what it would mean if we were at a 0 or a 1 or a 2, what it might mean. And there are never any good answers to that. But let me start with the glasses half full moment. So we should be finding out maybe as early as tonight, but certainly I think before the end of the week, what our second allocation of federal relief funds are, right? So we know that Connecticut was awarded the $474 million as part of the coronavirus relief legislation, and that we will receive our allocation based on our Title I population. So we did receive an email this week indicating that by the end of the week, we'll know that number, and Stephanie and I are waiting anxiously to see the number, see what strings are attached to the number, and see when those funds need to be spent down by, right? So certainly, that money isn't supposed to supplement, it's supposed to supplant likely, and there will likely be lots of strings attached to it in terms of remedial services or whether we can buy additional technology or how it shakes out. So I'm not prepared to talk about that in specifics yet, but if that money comes in and if it does provide us some cushion there, that might be one place that we would look to absorb any potential reductions, right? So glasses half full moment might be that we could keep what we have, reduce the budget if the second round of relief funds come in and they're healthy, right? If, so then what we would, let's game it out from there. If there were no additional relief funds that came through and we, took a 1% cut, well, that's $240,000 that Stephanie and I would need to go back into the budget book and start pulling from.
Right.
And that happens every year. And that's why, you end up with, the Frankenstein's monster of Chromebook devices all over, because they get cut and you can only buy certain kinds, and, you don't really have that. And unfortunately, that's what we would do again. Likely we would be looking at things, by that time, hopefully Stephanie would have a firm number on the insurance, and it would be lower, but who knows, it might be higher, but we would have to start having some difficult conversations. And then, of course, where it really boils down to, the most difficult conversation would be when you have to cut faculty and staff, and where that shows up right now. The worst case scenario, for anybody, is always looking to increase class sizes or cut programs. But if we take a 0 increase this year, like we did 2 years ago, frankly, between you, me, and the lamppost, I don't know how Philip held that together. I don't know how we would take a 0. At that point, Stephanie and I will be talking to you about the minimum budget requirement and, the doomsday that might mean. But ultimately, after you get through all, you can only cut so much stuff, and then you're looking at positions. Where those would be, well, we would look at class sizes, and, right now the policy is class size of 25. I don't advocate or support class sizes of 25, but the board policy currently says that's what we can go up to. And we can go beyond that in certain circumstances. I don't think the community would support that. I know I don't support it, or the faculty and staff would support it, but at some point when fiscal realities get to that point, that's where we'd be.
Okay.
Charles, just on that same issue, isn't it? And looking at your cover letter, this budget is already down 2 FTE, correct?
Right.
So that would be in addition
Correct.
to the 2 positions
would be
we're
if we
already
have-
eliminating to get to this number.
Correct. And don't forget, that sort of is a counterbalance to and you noticed on it's, if you have it with you, the what slide number is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Slide 8. You see the positions we've added. We've added positions, and the 2 FTE reductions are to sort of counterbalance those additions. Now, one of those positions, we'll talk about what those positions, I'll sort of give you my sense of where we are. I've kind of earmarked one of those reductions sort of to be determined somewhere in grades K through 4, right? Now, that is very sensitive to the reality that we don't know what our enrollment is going to be next year. And it's particularly difficult this year because we believe there are a number of families who are doing something called redshirting their kindergarten students that have decided not to have their students enroll in kindergarten this year because of the pandemic. And that's reflected in this year's relatively low kindergarten enrollment. The question will be whether when the pandemic's over, as we all hope it is, by September, and those families re-enroll, if we next year end up with a very large kindergarten class with people, enrolling their students in kindergarten, or potentially saying, and I know some families are, homeschooling their students for the kindergarten year and seeing an increase in the first grade numbers. But we won't know that until obviously the registration is done, which is, starts soon and happens over the coming months. So, Stephanie and I will always sort of, reserve the ability to come to the board in, April, May, June, or even July, August, and say, class sizes are up, registrations are higher, student enrollment is up, we need to add that position back. And, that's something we've done every year as the numbers get more real, as now they're very soft. So the FTE decrease is sort of somewhere in the K4 teaching ranks, we would identify it once we know what the real numbers end up being. So if we kind of play this out, I just want to give you the numbers as they might look, right? If the enrollments don't go up significantly, it could look like we would run 4 sections of first grade and the class size would average 20.5. It could be that we would run 5 sections of second grade and the class size would be 22. It could be that we would run 4 sections of third grade, the class size would be 24.25. Could be that we would run 4 sections of second grade, and again, that would be 24.5. So the reduction could happen in any one of those places, and that's where the class sizes would go up to. But I don't want to commit to those right now for 2 reasons. One, I think we have to bide our time this spring and see what the actual enrollment looks like. And then, of course, we want to look at those numbers and identify there may be cohorts within those groups that have larger numbers of special needs students that sort of factor into our decisions about which grade level we might be able to better respond to and increase class size if we end up in that position.
So is that for both of the FTEs, or is that just one FTE?
That's one.
Where's the other?
That's one of the FTEs. Well, let's do those one at a time. So any questions on the one FTE that we've sort of earmarked as a reduction K4? And then I'll talk to the other one because the other one also has a lengthier explanation.
No, I think we're good.
Okay, the second FTE, we've earmarked now at the middle school. Currently at the middle school, we have 4 English language arts teachers and 1 English language arts teacher who serves as a reading interventionist. Our idea is to take down one of those English language arts positions and have 3 English language arts teachers for the 2 grades and the 1 reading interventionist. What we've started a discussion and working on now would be a redesign of the 8th grade ELA program. And Eric and Chuck and the ELA curriculum specialist have already begun that discussion. And I would love to invite them back to a future meeting to give you some of the details about what that change looks like. But right now, just to give you the macro level, the 2 students in 8th grade have 2 ELA teachers. 1 teacher teaches them reading and 1 teacher teaches writing. The idea would be to make it more of a streamlined ELA reading and writing course, but then Mr. Hirschon and his team have some wonderful ideas about incorporating more writing into the capstone project that he wants to bring on board and pushing more persuasive and expository writing into the social studies courses to pick up some of those components. So the idea is go down 1 English teacher in 8th grade and redesign the ELA program by upgrading the capstone project and pushing more writing into our social studies courses.
So is that decision driven by the budget, or is that decision driven by a desire to change up the curriculum?
It is a little bit of both. It is a little bit of both, primarily budget. Mr. Hirschon has some brilliant ideas about capstone project and writing across the curriculum, and I think those are great ideas. But I would say that it is primarily a focus of budget needs, but I think that it's also going to make sure that we continue to offer high quality English language arts programming in the middle school.
It sounds like a more
And oh, by the
rigorous
way,
program.
and all of the Mr. Hirschon is on with us, and so is Mr. Martin. If you want some more details or some more information about it, we could certainly unmute them if you feel like you need a little bit more input into what that redesign might look like as you consider the reduction.
I would like to hear a little bit more. I want to make sure that this isn't going to be at a detriment to the students. So if they're willing to talk to it tonight, I'd love to hear it.
And can I
Of course,
add
Dylan,
on?
can you unmute? Thanks, Chuck. And can you unmute Eric too?
One at a time.
I was just going to add on to that question that Lauren just asked, if we could hear about how that's going to affect class sizes for the ELA 8th grade classes. I would love to hear that answer as well.
No problem. Yeah, no problem. So in terms of class size, it should not have an impact on overall class size. One thing that we have in 8th grade that we don't in 7th, which enables us to do this in 8th grade, is that they have everyday foreign language in 8th grade, which in 7th grade, it's taken every other day. So it can go opposite PE or something of that nature, where this would put foreign language into kind of their academic wheel of courses. The idea around it is also combined with the secondary building looking to align our schedule so that every period we are aligned and increasing our academic periods from what was current, and I'm speaking pre-COVID, what was 45 minutes in length, which is why we needed that double block ELA to implement readers and writers workshop, because that 45 was too short and 90 was a good fit. But as we implemented illustrative math and NGSS and science, 45 was then too short for those classes. So the drive came, and it came prior to me, to start building a schedule that could increase academic time in those areas as well. So in working with a committee that had started this work last year, they identified 60 minutes as kind of a sweet spot. And in implementing 60-minute schedules, obviously some time has to come from somewhere, and it was able to come from 8th grade ELA, but not 7th grade. And the combination of the two, with a reduction in one grade and keeping it in the other, actually keeps the combined minutes the same going over their middle school experience. Some of the work that we did this year using the pandemic as an opportunity was they previously also had a DEAR period, which was kind of like a middle school study hall, something that I didn't find would be appropriate when we had 87-minute blocks coming into this pandemic. So something we did is our unified arts teachers and our library media specialists started working on enrichment classes, where students engage in kind of short cycles of inquiry, where they're really doing independent-based research, focusing on study and research skills. My hope is to build those practices and transfer those over kind of in combination with my media specialist for 8th grade work and into social studies next year, to use some of that same curricular material to expand our social studies department to offer a full capstone experience. So some of the writing units and argumentative writing that they would be doing in 8th grade typically, they would be still facilitated through the capstone experience, which would also align to kind of communicating a middle schooler's successful implementation of our mission and vision as a middle school. So budget is part of this, but there is some vision in terms of what increasing the ELA across the content areas and literacy across the content areas is, to me, especially as we're preparing them in 8th grade to transition to high school, incredibly valuable.
That was my question. Is there a benefit to spreading that writing component into each different area, as opposed to just having it kind of, you do that in English class, not in
Absolutely.
math or
And
we've
even started this year with utilizing our IABs, our interim assessments for state testing, not just doing those in the English department, but utilizing those across social studies as well. Science also using the NGSS interim assessments to make sure that we're covering that content, not just in English class.
Did you want to add something, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, in terms of speaking to programmatic decisions, Readers and Writers Workshop, while it's something that's launched in the middle school, we're still transitioning into that program. So, we're not asking teachers to make a hard shift out of something that's been ingrained practice for a long time. I think another important consideration, it really does go back to, as we were looking at the schedule, to create an aligned middle and high school bell schedule, you're looking at a double block potentially of ELA being 120 minutes, which is greater than the 90-minute traditional double block that spoke to the pre-existing 45-minute period. So 90 minutes is about the max you would offer. 2 hours of ELA instruction every day it's too much, if I could say that. I think there's better ways to go about literacy instruction than putting kids in a single classroom for 2 hours a day. And I just think it's also important to note that math and science need more instructional minutes. So if we're going to give more instructional minutes to math and science and create a more balanced approach, which is something we really need given recently adopted tougher standards in both of those content areas, then it's going to draw from ELA. Not to the extreme detriment of ELA by any means, but to the collective betterment across the board of all of our classes.
And our hope is this split kind of holds hands from both the elementary school to the high school of that workshop model with that increased period of time, and then decreasing the time, but increasing the focus as we go to 8th grade to what you're typically preparing for, which is your 9th grade English class, and identifying that in a more rigorous, in a very rigorous method to get kids prepared for what they'll experience as they need to engage in literacy in high school with the PSATs and moving forward.
I'm happy to see the writing and reading component pushed into the science and math as well. That, you know, teaching things in isolation are never a good idea. They are all intertwined, and particularly communication, any kind of communication, but particularly being able to write. I think that's really important. It sounds very rigorous.
Yeah, part of those increased minutes across every other subject area will be focused on increasing those skills of literacy, which all of our teachers do as already, given that's part of our entire, the CCT rubric that we look at every year is how do we embed literacy. This just gives us more time across content area to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? And please forgive my ignorance about the capstone projects because it's not anything I'd ever heard of before becoming a Board of Ed member. When you're talking about the capstone project, is this an 8th grade capstone project, or it is? Okay, so is this new this year, or is this?
It would be new next year. This year, we're engaging in some short cycles of inquiry. I'm not calling it a capstone project. It's mostly in 7th grade where we're engaging in some research skills. Okay. And my reason for focusing them on them in 7th grade this year was, like I mentioned before, we have daily foreign language in 8th grade. And there was that time that otherwise would have been filled with more of a study hall period, which I did not want students engaging in when we're talking about increasing the focus of academic time in the building during the pandemic. So it's a skill set we've been working on this year, so they'll be prepared to engage in a rigorous capstone experience in 8th grade. Now, 8th grade capstone is not similar to, it's not necessarily like the high school, the state mandated capstone experience. This is something really to help measure the mission and vision of what we expect middle schoolers to be able to do. To really build towards that student success.
Okay. Thank you. I really appreciate both of what both of you have told us about this shifting around of ELA. I think it's been really helpful. So thank you.
So while we're talking with Eric, did anybody have any questions on the device replenishment proposal that they wanted to ask?
Well, I'll just say what I said before, just in the more information we can get about if there are other school systems in the state that are doing the leasing versus the purchasing, that would be helpful for us to know as we consider that option. If that's information that could be gotten.
Laurel?
No, I asked, I'm good on I think Lauren had some specific questions. I'm going to let her.
Well, interestingly, some of it was answered in the email that Charles answered to you. So my biggest question was about I was very confused looking at the chart about 525 devices and then 1,000. So wondering then, are we talking about 1,500? But what it seems like is we're talking about the lease will then restructure to 1,000 devices. So we're not talking about a replacement cycle of 1,500 devices. Am I reading that correctly? Oh, Eric's
needs
muted.
to be unmuted.
There
Okay,
you go.
sorry, I was trying to drop into the chat box.
There you go. Good.
So real quick, Tim, we did in the gathering of our quotes, every vendor that we've gathered quotes from has existing contracts in the state. I can get more specifics. We have Weathersfield. I believe Cromwell is someone that we know to be engaged in leasing, but that came through my IT department. But I'll get you some data on that. The state doesn't formally collect it.
Right.
And every
Yeah.
district, honestly, is in a different situation with how they do this. Some districts fund it through capital. Some districts do leasing. Some districts actually charge students and families to kind of rent to own devices. And a lot of that is part and parcel to their device policy, but I'll work on getting you that information and other members of the board.
Sure, thanks.
Yeah. And then, you know, Lauren, to answer your question, the idea is we want 1,000 devices under warranty at all times in the district. That's the simplest way to put it. That's 2/3 of our inventory, because with the manpower we have in district, we can keep up with repairs on about 500 devices. Once it gets beyond that, we start having to do external repairs, and that's super costly. Like you know, the price goes up exponentially from what you can do in-house. It's much like having someone work on your car versus doing it yourself. So we need 1,000 devices. Right now, as it stands, we have 475 devices under warranty. So we only need 525. In 4 years' time, we have no devices under warranty, so that number goes up to the full 1,000. But kind of in perpetuity here, the district's ongoing commitment will be to have 1,000 devices under lease in this program, with 500 in stock. That starts 4 years from now. I want the board and the town to see what's coming. This is the small wave before a much bigger wave.
Fairness, like I mentioned in the email, 4 years in the world of technology is an eternity, and 4 years from now, you know, who knows what we'll be using, right? We may all be avatars by that time, right? So, but yeah, if Chromebooks continue to be here in 4 years, yes, at that time everything would come out of warranty, and we would need to be looking at the second 4-year lease of 1,000. But I think that's a bridge to cross in 2025.
Can I jump in with a quick question here? So I think when looking through your comparison of the leasing versus buying, I understand why leasing makes a whole lot of sense for our district, and the ongoing repair issue, both in terms of person power hours and in terms of cost. That makes a lot of sense to me. I'm thinking back to the replacement cycle that was presented to us. I think it was last winter, maybe the winter before. I think it was last winter.
2019.
And the suggestion was to buy a quarter of the units that we needed every year over a 4-year cycle. So, and I understand also the perspective, and so we've gotten to the position where we don't have everything we need. But my concern is that if we go ahead with this plan, we find ourselves in 4 years with this massive cost to undertake the lease of 1,000 units. And so instead, you know what I mean? I'm wondering what happens then if we get there and we don't have the ability to fund that. Then we have 1,000 units that are all of our units are out of warranty. So I'm trying to understand the kind of the balance of ending up in that situation versus trying to undertake a quarter of the devices every year on a kind of rotational basis.
So, you know, I'm going to speak bluntly, knowing that this is not the position of any of the members of the board necessarily, or the town or any educators, but we're not going to be talking about technology as an optional cost from an instructional standpoint. So when the question was asked tonight, what are you losing if you make cuts to the budget? We're already arguably, as COVID has pushed us there, and we were behind the times in doing that in the world of education, to a place where we can't go back to not having technology in the hands of every student. You know, there's other options we could look at if we don't want to look at in that 4th year, that giant wave. I would still say we need 525 devices next year, whether we purchase them, whether we lease them. We could slowly add to that number every year through leasing. 525 becomes 700, becomes 850, becomes 1,000, so that you you get there over time and you're not running at 4 years at the drop of a huge lease cycle and the entrance into another. You'd have more of a, this portion of our lease devices expires this year. This portion of our lease devices the next year, this portion the following year. But keep in mind, we have a need for 525 devices. So even in that model, there's going to be a big year, you know, comparable to what we're looking at next year.
And Eric, is there any economy of scale, so to speak? Like, is it cheaper to lease 1,000 at a time than 250 separately each year?
You know, unfortunately, these are, there's no deals to be had in computers. They're in the highest demand right now. That said, we work with our vendors to get very aggressive pricing. That the numbers I presented to the board, I'm not saying we could come down a ton from there, but even on the lease or purchase side, you know, there's the expected amount of you know, coming off that number. 5,000 max. I just don't think, and
Right.
that's an estimate. I just don't think you're going to see precipitous volume discounts. We asked about it at the time we gathered our quotes, and the feeling was pretty cold. Like, you're not getting less. You're not paying less to buy more in this market.
So eventually we'd end up at that same number anyway. Even if it's, you know, if we start with this number this year and we do a few each year, we're still going to end up spending the same amount.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's options within our policy and our approach to being a one-to-one device district. You know, if this becomes an untenable situation for the town, it's been the position of the board that we're not going to charge students to possess devices. That is a model that's in place in other districts. I'm not going to give my perspective on that model other than to say it's out there. Some districts look at funding this through capital, and they, you know, they leverage that side of the town's economics. And like I said, there's ways we can look at slowly building up stores. But saying that, looking at that number of 525 devices, those current devices represent basically technology that's unusable in the district and still in circulation. And it's been a crisis point within our remote learning model this year.
The other thing that I'll mention is that we are seeing some layoffs in a totally unrelated area. Ford is apparently laying people off because they cannot get the computer chips that go in cars. As you mentioned, computers right now are in high demand. I spoke to somebody today who was buying computers through some state funding that had to be spent before December, and what they wanted to buy and what they ended up buying were two different things. They didn't get what they wanted on the first round. And so I think it's of greater interest to us to come up with a buying plan which does put smaller groups of computers in the budget every year, because I think that has to be in place. And I think that we are committed to one-on-one. We're not going to go back or lose ground at this point. So I think that's the other reason to come up with a plan that is a fixed expense in our budget every year from now on.
Any other questions on the device replenishment plan? No?
I guess I would be curious. I don't know how hard it would be to put together a proposal that did include the option to kind of space out that 1,000 devices over. I mean, clearly we need the 525 this year, but the remaining 1,000, if they could be spaced out over 3 years, what that would look like for us over the next couple of budget cycles versus that big 1,000 computer dump in 4 years.
I'm happy to do that. I just, you know, just to be clear, a couple things, and I'll just say it one more time to reiterate. It's 525 next year, no matter what, to solve
Right.
what, again, I'll term a current crisis.
Mhm.
You know, the 525 and then the 1,000, just remember also that it's a $65,000 commitment already in years 2, 3, and 4 on the 525. So we're going to add to that.
Mhm.
But I'll definitely put those numbers together and present them to the board. I think in terms of the budget question tonight, or the budget question as relates to leasing, is Are we interested in engaging in a leasing program of any sort? And if so, it doesn't change next year's number as proposed in the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Well, the other thing I would suggest we keep in mind is our historical lack of funding when we tried to do a replenishment plan where these were purchased. So many, when we were trying to purchase so many every year. That seemed to be a very, you know, it's much easier to cut a computer than a person from a budget. And that's kind of the way that it's always gone. But I think Eric's correct. We have to face the reality that going forward, the technology is going to be a requirement. So,
You know, I just want to very, very quickly add, Chuck Hirschon spoke to capstone. The question was asked, is this at like a capstone at the end of 8th grade? We graduate students in 5 different buildings. A vision of a graduate yields a capstone at every single level where we have a graduate. It's a vision of a graduate of Valley View, a graduate of Biz. Whenever the state talks about capstones, when we talk about capstone, when we talk about school accreditation processes, 21st century learning is the most commonly used, commonly referenced, common point of accountability in education right now. That effectively means computers. And, you know, Sharon, I understand we're talking about 2 FTE cuts and a massive expense for devices. One is the human capital, with how we deliver instruction, and one is literally the tool with which students are getting instruction in a 21st century classroom. So, thanks.
thank you. Chris, did you have any questions about this area or any other area?
No, not about this. I'm still kind of digesting all that.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just ask a couple quick things about some of the
Sure.
other things? So,
Yep.
I mean, again, just I think reiterate what Tim said before, how much I appreciate having this all be laid out like this. It makes it very easy if you're, you know, like I can do multiplication and addition and subtraction. So this really helps me with the math because I can see everything laid out. Where are we at in the, I can't remember, where are we at in the contract negotiation cycle for certified salaries?
We just did a 3-year contract. I think this is year 1.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
pretty sure. Am I correct, Charles? Isn't this year 1 of our
Are you
contract?
talking about?
CEA
Years?
Portland.
Oh,
Am I right, Stephanie?
For the teachers. Yeah.
the
Yes.
teacher is up in 2022.
Okay.
It's up this
So-
year.
Right. So the teacher contract is up in 2022. So we'll be negotiating this fall 2020. I mean, summer 2021.
Correct.
Right, and we are negotiating, we negotiated a 1-year extension with the administrators, so we'll be negotiating that this time next year. We're working on a 1-year extension, hopefully, we're still working on it. And again, I think these would be good conversations for an executive session with the administrative assistants and the custodians. And if we get that 1-year extension, we would be up next year. And I'm not sure where the paras are right now. I have to go back and look. Do you know, Stephanie, where are the paraprofessionals?
Everybody will be up 2022 if all of the extensions go through.
You'll have
Right.
5 negotiations.
Oh, wow.
Great.
Yes.
That'll be fun.
Yep, that'll be fun. But
The medical insurance line 21001. That's a huge increase. I guess that's not a question. Why is that such a huge increase?
COVID-19.
Okay.
The premium.
That would be my
just-
guess anyway.
The premium just for COVID is 9.5%. So then you add in the regular increase that we won't know till probably mid-March. But our person that we work with at the benefits place told me to budget at about 14%. So it's showing 12.88 because I've cut in other areas because there's a bunch of different things that fall within that line item. So we'll hopefully know by mid-March what the true number would be.
Gotcha. Thank you. Who's our carrier right now? I'm just curious because the majority of that must be teachers. Who's the carrier?
Oh, we couldn't hear you, Stephanie.
We can't
hear
hear you. We can't hear you. We can't hear
Can you hear
you.
me? Oh, can you hear me?
Now,
Yes.
We just switched to Kinetic Care this year.
And the purchase services in line 30030, that includes our I can't remember the name of it, the group that we
ESS.
Substitutes, yeah. Yep.
Okay, I think I got one. No, that's it. I'm good. Thank you.
Following up on that question regarding purchase services, aside from substitutes, what else is in there?
A lot of our contractual agreements. So there's a bunch of special ed charges in there. So Dawn would be able to speak more to those. Those are all the charges that go along with the outplacements, which we then claim some of that for Medicaid reimbursement. It's all of our increases on perfect temp contracts for our heating, our HVAC system, the fire system, our garbage, all the, the fixed price things that we use, exterminators, stuff like that.
So can you tell us what the actual dollar amount in that account is for just the substitutes through ESS?
Yes.
Can beat you to it, Stephanie.
You got it? So substitutes totals 212,000.
Now that's sorry, go ahead.
This year we're 200,000, so we went up 12,000.
And that's a contractual rate as well, right? We have a contract, we pay a certain rate. How long is that contract for?
We renew that every year.
Every year.
That comes up in June, does it not? Does that contract come up sometime?
June 30, yeah. But I want to say, I have to go back and look at my document when Philip negotiated, because we added in nursing to the subs. We may have realigned some of the pricing and got an extra year out of it, but I have to go back and confirm so that we would know what the actual payout would be.
I think that this is the second year of that contract. I think we did extend it. We were able to increase some and decrease others.
But that's a hard account. You have a flat rate, but you don't know how many people are going to call out. You don't know how many people are going to be long-term subs. So that's a guessing game with that. When the first year I started, we were $400,000 in the sub line. So it just depends what kind of year it is.
Yep.
Sure does.
And the other question I had is, now we're not budgeting any money for PVLA in the 21-22 school year. Is that right?
Have not.
Correct.
So what if we can't close PVLA?
Boy,
Sorry, Charles. Had to ask.
That was my question.
I want to say, I hope we're going to close PVLA in April, right? I mean, or May,
well,
vaccines are
what
coming.
if we can't?
And that's,
I'm all for being optimistic, but I'm also all for being realistic. And I think it's important that we know what we would be looking at if, in fact, the pandemic or the effects of the pandemic carry on longer than any of us hope and pray that they do, so that we can, come up with some type of a contingency plan or some sort. I don't know. Because I know that's not.
It would be
inexpensive endeavor.
Definitely. I mean, I certainly it would be prudent to put some money aside for it. The problem is, of course, we at that point, you know, we wouldn't even know how many students would be choosing PVLA. You know, at that point, you know, we're at 200, about 200 students now. You know, if we got to September and this were still going and we were still required to keep it open or otherwise not required, but, you know, hearing from large numbers of students that they still wanted it, we would have to know how many of our students were, you know, in each of the sections, you know, before we could work that out.
Right.
But certainly, that would require me to come back to you in the summer as we, you know, figure that out with a supplemental request, or, you know, going back in the budget and freezing again. And I mean, that's really what we did. Why we froze this year is because we had to pay for the PVLA, and you know that would likely be the first step. Would be to design the schedule, identify the costs, and then implement a mitigation strategy that either includes freezing our existing lines, tapping into the coronavirus relief funds, or worst case scenario, you know, going back to the town and asking for a supplemental to pay for it. You know, but that would be something we would have to do if we were in that position.
And if you know, have you received any guidance or suggestion from the state regarding like when you would start to look at that? Would it be April, May? Would you wait? I would hope we wouldn't wait until summer to,
Right.
you know, try
yeah.
to.
And I'm hoping by May we have another sense. And then there's the other thing. It just occurred to me, Sharon. It's a good question, right? To sort of game this out a little bit. But part of the reason why we did the PVLA this year is because, you know, we committed teachers to it. If the numbers were low enough, we might go back to our teachers association, renegotiate the MOU and put classroom cameras in classrooms and run the PVLA with teachers teaching a class with a couple of kids in that class learning from home. So, you know, there might be ways to restructure the PVLA so it's not a standalone school, but incorporate those students with cameras or telepresence into the classroom. So there's lots of different ways to you know, sort of look at that. And I think that I'm hoping that, you know, May, June, we're starting to get a sense of what is the efficacy of the vaccines? Are they standing up against this new iteration of the virus? Is it looking like we're going to be able to pull up the tent pegs on the PVLA and close it? Or is it looking like it's going to be here for a longer term? If it is here for a longer term, then I think our first decision would be, do we want to run it the way we're running it now, which is a standalone school district with dedicated teachers assigned to it? Or do we want to make it a sort of telepresence-like program where we have cameras in classrooms with all of our teachers? And we didn't like that to begin with. That's why we built the PVLA, but it would mean that a teacher might conceivably have, you know, 15 students in front of them in the classroom and another 5 students on the computer screen next to them, teaching them all at once, which our teachers aren't doing now.
Well, there's also the
So-
aspect that part of that's driven by the governor's executive order, correct? Giving parents the opportunity or ability to choose whether they want their children to come back, you know, be required to have their children to come back or not into the schools. So I don't know if there's anything, maybe Meg would be the person to ask this of that CABE's hearing. I know the legislative session just started, but, you know, I mean, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that there's going to be, regardless of the status of the science, well, there could be some families that still are not going to feel comfortable having their kids in school. So I don't know. I just really am asking the questions because I think it's something that we do need to consider and think about. It's as I look at this budget, it appears to me that this is we're planning basically for a back to normal school year. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say. And if it's not, I think that this budget, gives us the resources that, again, if we were in a unique situation, we would probably be doing what we've done this year, which is Stephanie and I freezing the budget and reallocating to cover COVID-related expenses. And then hoping, if this is still going on, additional rounds of support from federal or state entities would be available to help us satisfy what I would describe as unfunded mandates for PBLA or remote learning options, just like we've had this year. But yes, I think that is a fair way to say that this budget does anticipate a return to fully in-person normal school year. And boy, am I hoping that's the case, because I can't do another year like this.
Well, we all are.
This is,
We all.
Yeah, I will
this is-
say that the legislature is still, we're still out to planning, but there are some things that I've read across, the government, I mean, across the states, where people are saying we've got to have a plan B or a plan C, because if this does continue into the fall, as you plan your budgets for a normal school year or the reopening of what would be a normal school year, you also have to keep in mind that we may be more of the same. So they recommend earlier rather than later planning. And I think the conversation that we're having is a good one, just that we are considering, the reality. And we could.
Agreed. Yeah.
I appreciate the point too that you made, Dr. Britton, that if we have families who are in need of distance learning opportunities in the fall, that it doesn't necessarily have to look the same as PBLA has looked this year, right? That the governor's mandate wasn't to provide something like PBLA. What we did was extraordinary, and I think our district did it very well, and you all deserve so much praise for that. But if we're still needing this in the fall in a smaller way, that maybe there are some alternate ways to look at how we provide that in a more affordable way.
Right.
Thank you for that comment. And I agree. I think that what we did there was certainly, it was more expensive, but I think it also provided the level of support and commitment to the students who are choosing that option. So I appreciate that comment and thank you, but it doesn't mean we have to do it that way next year if we are still in that boat.
Yep.
So I think, any other questions on that area of the budget?
One quick comment back on the laptops, and I just want to, my fuzzy memory, didn't we at one point get some money from the Wheeler Grant Foundation for laptops? And if there's any ability to go back and try that again?
The Gildersleeve, you mean?
Was it
Gildersleeve?
Gildersleeve?
Gildersleeve.
Gildersleeve, yeah.
What did I say?
Wheeler.
Wheeler, that's okay.
Oh,
I think it's the Gildersleeve Wheeler Fund.
Yeah. Gildersleeve, sorry.
Yeah. Yes, the initial purchase of not all, but many of the Chromebooks was generously funded by a grant from the Gildersleeve Foundation. So the one of the bylaws or expectations of Gildersleeve is that they
Right.
give you these grants as seed money, and that the district's supposed to pick up and sustain that in the future. I'm not sure how receptive they would be to another request for more funding in this area when they've already funded the first. Essentially, they were the ones who, believe it or not, this is, you can sort of see it in Eric's presentation. They gave us the seed money for the N21s, which we're still using. That gives you a sense of how long we've been benefiting from their generous support, even though those devices at this point are just rough shape. I mean, they're terrible. They're terrible.
So the other area that I had a couple of questions about was the, and of course I'm not being able to find the line, the maintenance, building maintenance decisions. Maybe it's in a different place. I'm looking in the wrong.
What number is that, Sharon?
If I could find it, Laura, I'd tell you.
4003.
44003.
Repair.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, repairs and maintenance. Yeah.
Oh.
That's we gave that a 0% increase. It's
Okay.
the proposed budget at 291, 202.
And
A
that,
specific question?
well, I just wanted to be sure everyone understood the what exactly that's meant to cover.
So
Nobody else got
that's
any questions about that?
the largest part of that account is the repairs and maintenance to the HVAC systems. So through Perfect Temp, we have a contract with them to get a certain hourly rate, and this is to repair all the boilers, the furnaces. They do this ours plumbing. That's a majority of that account. There's other items in there, Unitech, Dugmore and Duncan for doors and hardware, any basic kind of upkeep of objects within our buildings. And Carl may have more info on that too, if there's anything specific. But we keep
That's pretty
cutting
much
from that
Carl's
line. We keep
budget.
cutting from that line every year. So that's just less work we could do.
And don't forget too, I'm sure Carl's listening to this, and if we want to unmute Carl, he would surely chime in with more details. But you know that funding is to support 4 buildings, really 5 if you consider the middle school and the high school separate. But certainly 3 of those buildings, as we know from the Sightlines report, are in need of tender love and care from Carl and his crew. So that budget could probably be tripled, and just get us down the road of what's in the Sightlines report.
Okay, so the funds in that line item are basically to kind maintain the status quo while our facilities committee. What are you calling the facilities committee that you're putting together?
The facilities steering committee.
Thank you. The steering committee does its job, so we're just kind of trying to maintain the status quo.
Yeah, we're
Is that
not,
right, Carl?
yes, we're not, I mean, obviously not doing any improvements per se, you know, to make something better. We're just using this money to put fires out. I mean, you know, literally repair things that need to be repaired on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, to get us through the year. Could we, like Charles says, could we use a lot more money? Absolutely. We've kind of made a decision this year between the Buildings and Grounds Committee, which I think you've heard, was to really emphasize our repairs if we can on the secondary school, high school, middle school, until we make some serious decisions on the other 3. And if something breaks, obviously at one of them, we have to fix it. But until we really come up with a plan with Sightlines and how we're going to go, I think that's the decision that we chose to go with. Again, the Buildings and Grounds Committee and myself. Yep.
And the only other issue, Carl, that I probably question for you is the $743,000 request from Capital. That's what's in there, just 3 things?
What is in there this year is the track. The Stephanie, help me out with that.
The auditorium. I'm just looking at Charles' letter.
Oh, the lighting and the
the
lighting, the auditorium, and the track.
Right. The auditorium, that would be the microphone system that we've talked about for a couple of years, which is obsolete. That if you remember me saying to you, if somebody was talking on a cell phone out in the lobby of the middle school, it could potentially come over one of the speakers of somebody that was in a play or something like that going on, because it's obsolete. And the other project is the lighting, which controls parking lot lights, interior, some of the interior lights. That is also obsolete. The company who installed it is out of business. It was really been obsolete since a few years after the high school, middle school project was complete. And I would like to decommission that. We're trying to work on a way and make that a little simpler than it is now.
And the $550,000 for the track, that is a brand new track from top to bottom, correct?
That is the old track completely ripped out, except for the drainage. Base fixed anywhere that it would need to be fixed, repaved, and with a base coat, finish coat. And then as you see it like it is with the rubber coating on the top, all the lines and everything like that finished. That's no new fencing, nothing done to the athletic field out in the middle. That is strictly the track.
Okay. And I was racking my brain trying to remember, and I was wondering if you could remember the first time that the Board of Education requested capital money for the track.
I believe it was 330,000.
And do you remember what year that was?
Okay. I'm going to say it was the last year, the final window project year. I know that it was that year at Brownstone Intermediate School. I don't know. Stephanie, would you have that, what year those were put in?
I came in October of 18 and it was before that. So
Yeah.
probably 16, 17, 18.
I think it was about 16 because I think Dave was on it that year that I was still the recording secretary. He wanted the windows fixed.
I wasn't in that job, this job then. I was in the old job.
And so when they just paid like $11,000 to fix some things.
Right, they just did some repairs instead.
So it's been at least 4 or 5 years that we've been
is
requesting money to repair the track.
We request it. It's in there usually every year.
And Carl, just to clarify, is the track not usable? Is it not being used, or is it not being used just for meets, or what's the status of it right now? I've heard different things.
Okay, so obviously this past year we were in a different world. So the sports were off. So we didn't have any track meets. It's used a little bit in cross country. I don't recall that we had any cross country this year, or maybe a couples. I don't think we had any. So it is used constantly by the public and the gym classes and everything like that, but we didn't have any meets. Now, usually what I do is evaluate that in like March after we get through the winter to see where we're at. The problem is doing that. The weather has to be with us to fix it properly. Like they need, for an example, like 45 degree nights on a regular basis, which usually doesn't happen till like May. And then they need those, 60, 70 degree days to work on it. At that point, the thing's usually in use. So we can try to make some repairs. We were going to do that last year, if you remember, for $11,000, and we decided not to. But again, even if we had spent, Tim, the $11,000 last year, who knows what kind of winter we would have had this year and what kind of more damage would have been done to it.
Right.
It's honestly, it's at the end of its life.
Yeah.
And hopefully our prices are going to come in better than that. And that was the actual quote that we have for it, the latest quote. And I think we,
Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
Am I correct in remembering that when you talked to us about this last March, you said that this, I thought the repairs that you suggested were possible were a very short-term fix, and that the track as it is unusable, that our teams shouldn't be practicing on them because of safety concerns, and that they couldn't be used for meets. Is
Yes, and that was recommended by the track repair / building company. And I know you could say, well, they're in the business to rebuild tracks, but when they're dealing with this kind of stuff every day, I have to take their expert advice and do agree with what they say, because there's several of us that have walked it on, some of the Board of Ed members. Charles has walked it and seen the amount of cracks and damage and dangerous areas in it. I think we're going to have to make a decision. I honestly don't know.
Yeah, I would just,
Go ahead.
Carl, I would just know, I think I see Chris Serra on here too. He can tell you as well as I can that, when a track meet is happening on that track, athletes are running as fast as they can around that track. Now, walking around it, okay, you can see the spots that are bare or, go slow, right? Walk slowly, like walking over ice or whatever. But, when you're doing 100-yard dash as fast as you can, Chris, are you on the line?
Yes.
Can we unmute Chris Sarah? Chris, do you want to just talk a little bit about the realities that the track poses in terms of athletic competition and that reality?
So this spring, we were prepared to not use the track for meets, and this past spring, due to the fact that it was unsafe for the amount of running that Dr. Britton just stated. And this upcoming spring, we're prepared to do the same in terms of traveling to our counterparts for home meets. And the cracks in the track are almost a ½ inch to an inch big. And in some of the corners, the track is actually lifting up. And this is unsafe for even the public to use in those areas if they're running that fast. To walk, it's fine. But we are in dire need, and I believe that the track has not even been, even touched in terms of a whole new track since the renovation was done to the school. And for our athletes to compete at home and have senior days and nights, this is a crucial component for our track team. And we have a lot of members of our high school that are on the track team. And like what was mentioned before, our PE classes use them a lot, as well as our cross country teams, middle school and high school. That track is used every single day. So it's imperative that we get this replaced.
And if I could add something to that, the public uses it. Adults, they're here constantly, weekends, nights, early in the morning before school starts.
Right.
Places
That was
a lot.
And that was my understanding, Chris, what you said is that last year the decision had been made that there would not be meets on it and that our home meets would be held elsewhere.
That's what we would do this year if we had to.
And then this year,
we would
right,
have to.
if we had to, right. Right. Thank you.
Can I just ask, are there liability concerns to the town or to the Board of Education for having members of the public walking or running on an unsafe, unusable track?
Well, I think that's probably a concern that we should have. And
it's a concern, but it's also, people choose to go up there, as well as the foundation in terms of where the people walk is fine. And it would be like going on the field, and if there's, uneven surface and somebody trips, I mean, that's the same type of concept. The actual area where people are walking for public is okay for them to walk, and where some of them jog is fine. But in terms of competition, where you're having these athletes go full force, that's where the liability is, and that's why we wouldn't have home meets.
okay. Chris, Darby, did you have any other questions about the budget
Good, thank
at
you.
this point? Any other areas, Laurel? Any other questions?
Yeah, we've covered a lot, which has been really, really great. I had one thing that I'd asked Charles earlier. I was just expressing that I was glad that that his executive summary document of this budget included our commitment to our prioritization of funding, addressing our district social, emotional, and behavioral needs, as well as equity. I was grateful that that was in there. I was noting that I see that in the equity and the GSA coordinators, as well as the CERBI building coordinators. And I was asking if there's anywhere else in the budget where we should be aware of that happening. And Charles reminded me, of course, about the Wheeler Clinic and our Bridges program, and both of which are fantastic programs. I'm so glad we've committed to investing in over the last couple of years. And I'm wondering if it would be useful for our board and for our community and perhaps our selectmen, if Dawn, if you're able to draw up a document for us outlining the costs of running these programs compared to your best guess at what costs we would have otherwise seen this past year without placement costs. That, I feel like that would be something that would be really useful for us to look at.
Hi, good evening, everybody.
Hi,
Can you
good
guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Sure, I'd be more than glad to do that. We did kind of a cost analysis last year when we were proposing adding the staff to build the Bridge program.
Yep.
And in addition, we did that initially when we rolled out the Wheeler Clinic project 2 years prior. So I can really update those numbers and just talk about what we're providing. And I'll get that to you guys. I'll get it to Charles as soon as possible.
I think that'd be really helpful for us to see that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I ask, Dawn, while you're on, can you address the ELL teacher staying at a 0.5?
Sure, and if you saw my my department summary too, as far as student services, when I talked about unmet needs, those were 2 areas that were unmet needs, or one of 2 areas. Is I really would like to move us to a 1.0 for the FTE of the EL teacher. Our numbers represent that. I'll give you an example. Right now, our EL teacher is out on maternity leave. I believe she had a baby earlier in the week, and that's exciting for her. And we have a substitute in place, but that substitute for the next 2.5 months will be, for that 0.5 time, will be doing nothing but administering the Lost Links test. They won't be doing any other instruction or anything like that, because there's 4 sections to that test that most of it has to be individually administered, especially with children that are very young, like our kindergarten students, and with students that have a limited English proficiency to be able to follow directions. It will take each student several hours to take that test, and it's done individually or in very small groups. So when you think about the lost time for extra instruction, it is quite significant. Our numbers continue to grow. We're at 47. I believe we just moved to 48 identified students that qualify for EL programming. And they're across all areas from beginning to almost reaching proficiency. And I would be my goal and my dream before I retire someday here soon to be able to have a full 1.0 FTE for that position and have a much more robust program. The needs present it, and especially as we restructure our ELA teachers and some of our programming to address reading and writing across the curriculum at the secondary level, many of these students will be in the middle school and high school before we know it.
Dawn, is there a threshold that we're going to cross in terms of numbers of students who are entitled to and need these services? Is there a number of students that we're going to cross where you're going to come to us and say, you know, we've hit X number of students and we absolutely need 1.0 FTE or 0.8 or whatever it is, you know what I mean?
Right. Well, you know, at Christmas time, we use that term, there's no room at the inn. We're really at that point where there's no room at the inn right now. And if we have even just a couple more students enter in, I don't know, after the Lost Links testing period is over and our substitute digs in and starts getting back to direct EL, English instruction for new English learners, it's going to, we're reaching that point very quickly. And every year this is my 4th year now, every year our numbers go up, and I anticipate they'll go up again next year.
Is there any other personnel that can administer this loss link test? Or is it only an ELA certified teacher who can?
No, and actually we have a wonderful staff member, Denitsa, she's actually been working as the long-term sub right now. We're having a lot of difficulty getting a certified TESOL teacher that wants to work part-time for a temporary position. So she's doing the testing, and she's a para in our district. She's a native Spanish speaker. She does a beautiful job with our family. She was assisting all throughout the fall while our EL teacher was teaching remotely due to her pregnancy. So she's the best person to have in the job, short of having a certified TESOL teacher there.
Okay, but additionally, are there any other paras or people that could be pulled to kind of move this testing along so that we could get to the instructional component?
I've looked at that with the principals, especially the principals of the younger grade levels. And remember, we're coming into full in-person learning on Tuesday.
No.
And we are complete, everybody is spoken for.
Okay.
And, obviously we can, if we have spare time, we have somebody that we can, move into there because of student absences or something in special ed, some of those one-on-one positions.
Yeah.
But right now I can speak definitely for Valley View and Gildersleeve. We still have a continuing need.
Very tight. And I know you look at everything and don't leave anything unturned. So thank you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Mm-mm.
I mean, I have a general question, and Dawn, this may be for you or it may be for Charles, but this is a question about the 3 para positions that we're looking to absorb with this budget. I'm wondering if you have a general sense of where those are coming from. I'm thinking about our students who are coming back from a really kind of up and down, unpredictable kind of year, who might have increased social, emotional, behavioral needs. And I'm thinking about incoming kindergartners who maybe missed out on a year of preschool this year. That there might be unidentified needs in our kindergartners. So do you have a sense of where these would come from and what the impact would be?
So we do have several paras right now that are working, they're supporting the PVLA. So when we close the PVLA and all of our students are back in person, and I know we had a great debate about that a little while ago in the meeting, we're planning moving forward for September 1 that all learning will be in person. If something's different, we'll adjust that when we come to it. But the anticipation is we would be able to move forward without 3 para positions, with PVLA being closed and everybody restored back to their original positions. That being said, and I say this every year when we build this budget in December and present it in January, even since I've given Stephanie and Charles my budget, we've already had changes in enrollment, that we've had kiddos coming in that are coming in that may require that type of support. So I may be coming back to you even as early as September and say, people help, we need to add somebody in. But we don't stack the budget on what we think potentially could come through the door. Everything, both outplacement costs and staffing costs, are for the students that we actively have in the district at this time. We don't pad the budget, so to say. So, okay.
Thank you, Dawn.
You're welcome. Any other questions? All right, I'm here if you need me.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other questions on the budget in general?
I was hoping that Stephanie could explain the changes in the IDEA grant, or actually I'm sorry, that might have been Dawn. I just said, we just said goodbye. Whichever of you could give me a better grasp on what these changes are with the IDEA grants.
Dawn, that might better be you. Might be able to do that better.
Medicaid reimbursement piece, I think I have a 50,000-foot view of that. Can you unmute and jump back in and give us the more specific view of why our clinicians need to be outside of that grant because they bill to Medicaid?
Sorry, I was stuck in a loop that wouldn't let me talk again. Somebody was trying to keep me quiet, perhaps. So one of the things that we have come to know over the years is, you know, over the last 3 years, we've actively become engaged with uh, applying for Medicaid reimbursement. And when you are reimbursed through Medicaid, it's a federal reimbursement. We cannot, and there's only certain set people that their services are reimbursable. So it's really medical services that are provided during the school day. So things like OT, PT, speech, counseling, nursing services, and part of an IEP. Those are things that we can get reimbursed for through Medicaid for certain students. So that's great. So we keep that in mind, but we also cannot apply those same costs to the IDEA grant, which is also federal funding. So what we've been really careful through both learning from our auditors and what I've learned as a grant manager and Stephanie in her role, we've made sure that everybody that could possibly be Medicaid reimbursable, their services, made sure that their services are no longer built into the IDEA grant. As you see, our IDEA grant is quite sizable, and we've had teachers and clinicians and therapists built into there. So now we make sure that those are all part of the LEA budget, and we put in services that are not reimbursable at this point, like our paraeducators. We've built some of those and a reading specialist, things that are more academic in nature versus medical in nature. So we've just cleaned that up. So that's why we've shifted some around. Does that make sense, Laurel?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Excuse me.
Okay, any other questions? Tim?
No.
No? Okay.
I do have one about open choice and whether we will try to rebuild the students that we lost this year, if we go back to full open in September. If the lottery will open again and parents will be able to choose us to send their kids.
Yes, we will increase our seat declarations when that form comes out to us. And as a matter of fact, just today, Dylan, Joe Santaveneer, Corey, and I met. We're making some promotional videos and preparing some materials for CREC to help market Portland for any Hartford families who might be considering us. So both through that process in terms of direct marketing and opening more seats to make up for the ones that weren't filled this year, I think we'll reclaim those students.
Great. Okay, good. Thank you.
I did see that the legislature, I think, and certainly the State Board of Education is talking about how they can increase open choice enrollment in districts, and they're talking about increasing those amounts as part of that. And we can be hopeful that that'll be part of what happens, regardless of how many students we are able to open up seats for. But it would be great to increase the reimbursement rate.
Could we, Charles, at some point see some updated numbers on what our current grade level enrollments are with our open choice students versus, and also how many seats you plan to offer up next year?
I can do that. We have, Stephanie, you have the number now. Is it 57?
We have that.
Yeah, it's 57 right now. I don't know how that's broken up throughout grade levels.
Grade level.
I'd just be curious. There's no rush on that. I'm just curious on kind of where we're at and what it looks like K-12.
We had that on one of those enrollment reports. There was at one point
Not
there
the
was
most
a line.
recent one, though.
No. This was back a ways.
Yeah, I do remember that, Tim, a while ago.
Showed, yeah.
I'll put it in the Friday email to you.
So I know the goal was to spread that out, bring in students at the younger and lower grades, and then have those students remain with us through the 12th grade.
We still are at the threshold, though, at least to get the full reimbursement. So over 4%, you get the 8,000, and we're at 4.6. So we're still going to at least get that.
Oh, good.
Right.
And they do give supplemental if you, I believe, have more than 10 in a class, 5 or 10. I have to go back and look, but they give you additional funds because we got that last year. To show the equity throughout the classrooms. This year is just a strange year, and hopefully it'll be back to normal next year.
It has been.
Okay. No other questions from the board?
No.
All right. Is there, sorry for the background music. Any thoughts about moving forward with the budget? Do you want to wait and reconvene on Thursday, give it a little more thought? See if, based upon the information we've been provided, there's any other questions that come up?
Do we have a meeting this
Sure.
Thursday?
Meg reminded me that there are three options, right? It would be and unlikely or not sure, but you could take action tonight. We could meet again Thursday, or we have a regular meeting scheduled for the 19th.
The 19th.
You could take action then. And then, of course, in the meantime, email me questions or whatnot. So it sort of would be, if we feel like we need to get together Thursday, happy to be here. We can do that. Or if you feel like, just need some time to process and digest it, we could have it as an agenda item for our regular meeting, the second meeting of January, which is next week.
Okay, so maybe what we can do tonight is just kind of think about it, and if anyone feels the need to get together on Thursday, I guess we would need to know that by tomorrow. I don't know if there's any time requirement for canceling a meeting, because I know it's already been noticed, hasn't it, Charles?
It is noticed. Yep. I think we have to have 20. I think Meg needs to know 24 hours before, because she's got to post to cancel. I think she has to post it.
Oh,
or,
okay.
Yeah, or before noontime of the day of the meeting or something. There's
All right, so maybe Charles, you could check with Meg on that tomorrow morning, and just send us a quick email to let us know when that decision would have to be made. It doesn't sound like from our discussion this evening that there were any areas where anybody, at least at this point, is looking for any more specific information. Is that fair to say? So,
yeah, I think there was just some general information. I don't know how much it would influence, at least for me, in terms of supporting the budget or not. But I know I was interested in hearing more about the leases, if there's more information out there about the number of districts that do that and that sort of thing. But otherwise, no.
well, I guess the takeaway that I took from Eric's conversation earlier was, however we determine, kind of conceptually going forward, however we want to handle that, what we would be looking at least for this coming budget year, is leasing 525.
Or buying 525.
Yeah.
Right. So leasing at $95,025 or purchasing at $279,300. So,
yeah,
I
leasing
understand.
sounds better to me.
Well, yes, considering everything else we have to think about money wise, but I also would be interested in kind of looking at whether we could break up that 1,000 devices into smaller increments, and if it would make any sense financially.
But that's in the out years anyway.
Right.
That
not next year. Yeah, not in this budget, but in when we get to year 5, I guess.
Right.
And I think it's a good idea that we start looking at it now as opposed to in year 4.
Yeah.
So that's good. All right. So does anyone want to make a motion regarding the meeting on Thursday?
You mean a motion to cancel Thursday's meeting? I would make that motion that we cancel the meeting for Thursday evening and resume budget discussions at our regularly scheduled meeting on the 19th.
There a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Um,
I'm opposed.
Okay. So 6-4, 1 opposed.
Yeah.
The motion carries. And Charles, I guess we can anticipate getting the information that we've discussed from you. I think you said in the Friday email.
I'll get you the open choice enrollment in the Friday email. And then Eric, if he's able to by Friday, give you at least a sense of what districts out there are leasing. I'm not sure if he'll be able to pull that together by Friday, but if he does, I will certainly get that to you. And then I would just encourage you that, as you leave tonight and continue to look at the budget and have any other wonderings, I'm an email or a phone call away, and Stephanie and I would be happy to, get you whatever information you feel like you need.
All
I
right.
think there's so many unknowns, that we won't know until April or May on insurance or on
Yep.
there's a lot of unknowns. Yep.
Charles, I do have one question. In the past, our previous superintendent, there would be discussions with the town or first select woman on, where, kind of talking about the budget and the increase and where the town was coming from or what we think we might get in terms of support for an increase. Have you had that kind of a discussion with, and could you share if there was, how that went?
Yeah, I spoke with Susan about this. Certainly, I think that she'll know more, and I know Tom and the town will know more once they start taking a look at net grand list and what the implications of the mill rates will be. And I'm not sure if they have that information yet. I don't want to.
No.
I know when I spoke with her about it, she hadn't had it yet, but would likely have it soon. That's the most important bellwether. The good news I was told, and I think that this is a reflection not only of Portland, but of the state, is that even through this pandemic, the housing market is very strong right now.
Yeah.
And that most house sales are going for above list price, right? Which is a signal that, clearly that the property tax base has not fallen off the table, right? If housing sales is an indicator. So we'll know more once again, the sense of the changes on the net grand list and how that sort of shakes out. I don't have specifics on that yet, but I have had some initial conversations. Generally, I think 3.97 is probably a little richer, a little bit higher than what the town may be looking for. But I don't think we're out of the ballpark by any means. And again, I say that, if you look at the past 3 years, the increases,
Right.
except for that 1 year, which was 0, which would be very difficult to sustain. I'm hoping that, we make a compelling argument that it's time for a more substantial increase than the 2.2 or 2.5. I do have a sense that the town will be very interested in vetting and discussing the leasing arrangement. When you take on a lease, that the town takes that on because we don't have equity, they do. So it would have to be something that Tom would have to enter into. And then, of course, all of the discussions that will come out about that is that becomes then a fixed expense. That's something that, once you sign the lease, that's what you're committing to every year. And you don't have a lot of discretion over that in the next 3 years. And that's a discussion. I think that's what we discussed tonight. That's the negative side of it. And that's something that I imagine that the town will be very interested in us discussing and having as part of our proposal. Stephanie, do you know when Tom gets the net grand list and what we're looking at is that February? when
I'm
the tax
sure, I
receipts
mean,
come
taxes
in?
are due February 1st, I think, so I would assume it's shortly after. I'm not sure though.
You mean for the value of the grand list or the collection rate?
Well, they'll have to
Both.
look at the revenue that they receive in for the taxes also.
Mhm.
The grand list, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure what, Charles, what you mean by the net grand list.
Value of
gone
the
up or
properties,
down.
That's the serve the tax base.
If it's increased or decreased, is that what you mean?
That's what I mean, right?
Right,
Okay.
because an increase in the grand list is gonna
Mhm.
reduce the mill rate, possibly.
Correct. Right. And an increase in that could mean that a zero tax site would still reap more tax revenue, right? So
Right.
that is something I know that town
It's the
officials are going
dream.
to be very interested in. It's the right, right.
You got it. Okay. Okay.
I'm wondering, and hopefully this isn't an unreasonable request, but Meg started to get at this earlier with her question about, you know, what if our budget is 1% or 2% or whatever, you know, what do we cut? I'm wondering if for our next meeting, Charles, if you would be able to provide us with a list of, you know, if the board is to put forward a 3% budget instead of, you know, nearly 4%, what actual cuts would you be recommending so that we can see that kind of in front of us, what that would look like? Because I'm looking at these numbers and I'm thinking, you know, as Dave mentioned, 84% of this is contractual increases in our benefits. And so I want to see what it looks like if we have to kind of take a tougher approach. I want to know exactly what that looks like. Is that reasonable? Is that something you'd be able to provide for us?
Well,
So let me just see if
Wait.
I'm just wondering if what you're asking is like if Stephanie and I went and said, okay, if we were reduced to 3.5, these are the things we'd recommend to cut. If we were reduced to 3.25, these are the things. If we're reduced to 3%, these are the things. Is that sort of what you mean? Like kind of-
Yeah. And in the past around budget difficulties, that's something that Philip provided to us, you know, a list of like, if we have to, you know, here's the first tier of cuts and the second tier of cuts. And it would be helpful to see that laid out.
Yeah, I think
Just have
I don't
mixed
know.
feelings about that myself.
I do too.
Well, I think
do
that we
too.
have a lot of unknowns. I mean, we're rolling over, what we're doing is we're kicking the can down the road on the contracts because we're rolling over for the next year. We're going to negotiate 5 contracts in 22, 23. No, whatever that year.
122.
So, you know, what we're doing
that
is
one now.
we're doing the minimal amount of increases. And we still have a couple of contracts that haven't settled. They, you know, they may not settle. You know, what if somebody doesn't want to roll the contract over and accept whatever they're getting this year? I mean, there's just a lot of unknowns, and also the insurance. And do we go shopping for another insurance company again? We've done that in the past. Much to our surprise, the lower rate resulted in a higher rate the following year, but you know, we have gone shopping. So I just think there's a lot of unknowns in this budget. And I'd like to
big one
see
I would just
a
throw out there.
specific list of what we would cut or reduce or freeze.
The other one too is, you know, I think we'll know before the end of the week what our next allocation from the relief funding is. And then
Right.
what strings are attached to that and how long we have, whether it's the rest of this year or to September 2022 or you know, those timeframes. You know, and it's an interesting request too, to, you know, go through that exercise of sort of laying out their things we would cut. You know, that is fraught. You know, there
Yep.
could be some downsides to
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah. They must not really need that.
Well, I think that's the concern, right? Is that once you start to isolate certain things, well, this is kind of extraneous, or this we could live without. You know, does this budget really reflect what we as a board? I mean, superintendent's presenting it to us, and he's saying, "This is what I need. This is our estimate for what we need to carry out our mission to educate the children in the town of Portland and meet their social and emotional needs." If I think the
Because
board
again,
wants to say,
you know-
well, we think that's too much and we'd like to see you cut, 1%, then that would be relevant to say, bring us back 1% of cuts. But I don't know, just as an exercise in.
The reason I brought it up, just to reframe that, because I understand that perspective, but the flip side is that I think all of us are sitting here thinking, this is probably, the best we can do. This is a good budget. It deals with our contractual obligations, and it does, as Dave mentioned, it leaves very little room for dreaming. It just is covering our bases, this budget, right? And also, I would guess that all of us are sitting here thinking, how does this get approved? Right. So I'm trying to balance that feeling with thinking that it would be useful to see what would happen if this doesn't get approved. I think it's useful for our community to see what happens if this doesn't get approved. I understand your perspective, Tim, that it maybe sows seeds of doubt or something, but.
Well, yeah, because I think the way it normally would happen is if this board now, someone made a motion to accept the superintendent's budget and have it become ours, and it were voted on and it were approved, then it would go to the Board of Selectmen acting as their role as the finance committee essentially. And then they're the ones who would then tell us, well, we think this is 1% too high. If we cut 1%, what's that going to look like? I'd rather the Board of Selectmen tell us that as the finance committee than have us, kind of plant that out there now. That's just my thing.
That's fair. I'm trying.
Trish, you like that idea too? I
But
see your head
I
nod.
think that takes the responsibility that we have to make wise decisions. And I think putting it, I think that's kicking the can down the road, quite frankly, to get somebody else to do it. We're going to have to do some dirty work if we have to cut the budget. And it's incumbent upon us to know what those potential cuts could be and how they will affect student achievement and our resources. It's a tough, look, this has been a really tough year. If anybody thought the Board of Ed was a good place to hang out and celebrate learning and all the wonderful things that go on in our schools, this year has been really tough, and it's not going to prove to be any easier. But I think we have to be aware that we could potentially have cuts, and it could be on us to make those decisions.
Right, and it's a discussion we may have to have, but I think the concern, and it would kind of just be reiterating what Tim was kind of saying, and I would allude to the same thing. There isn't any fluff here, and I would hate to create a scenario where we give an impression where, well, we could live without, certain things, so then that must be the fluff. So.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I have to agree with Tim on this one too.
Okay.
I do feel like this is so trim. Like I just can't picture where more money, we're eliminating positions already.
Right.
I just can't picture what else can get eliminated.
We need to think about it. I don't know that we need to we're going to hope for the best, like with the pandemic and everything else. We're going to hope for the best. And, we as the school board need to consider, alternative scenarios. But I think that through the questions and the discussions that we had this evening, any areas where we thought there may be some room, those questions have been answered. And, in terms of the needs for technology, it's not a want, it's a requirement in order to be able to fulfill our role and the district's commitment to our children. So, I think we need to consider to think and look at it. We can talk about it at our next meeting and be ready to defend what we land on, as opposed to you know, kind of move on to the next phase before we're hoping never to go. But I hear what you're saying, Laurel, and it's something we need to think about. I'm not saying that, but I think that this is a very defendable budget. And we'll have another week basically to think about it and see if there's any other issues that come up or concerns. I don't know if there's anything else that's kind of been proposed to be scheduled at our next meeting, Charles, but I would request that there not be much else. I think I would like to have an update from Stephanie on where we are with our this year's budget. To
Yeah,
get
I'm
an
doing
idea
that.
about that.
I moved the financial report to that meeting because the last meeting was so packed.
Yes,
So
thank you.
that's on the agenda for
Yeah.
Tuesday.
Yeah. So that'll be good. Maybe we'll just keep it all financial. We'll look at where we are now and our plans for next year by way of this budget.
We're probably gonna need an executive session just to, bring the board up to speed on some of the negotiations that are ongoing.
Yep,
So
that's a good idea too.
I agree with you. I think we got a lot on there.
Yep. Okay. Anything anybody else wants to discuss regarding the budget? If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I was just gonna say one thing, just
Sure,
keep in
Dave.
mind the budget schedule, because we have time, because actually not until the end of March do we have the workshops with the Board of Selectmen. So again, I'm agreeing with what we said tonight is if we stand behind our current budget and then they decide it needs to be re-looked at or changed, then we can revisit it at that time. And I think there's plenty of time to do that. That's just a comment.
Yep.
I'll make a motion to adjourn at 9 p.m.
I'll second that.
And
Is
second.
it 9 p.m.? Do we have to wait? Oh, no, it's
Yeah.
exactly 9.
It's 9
9
p.m.
o'clock. It's early. Well,
Perfect.
Relatively
Paul.
speaking. Relatively speaking.
Did we
All
vote
in
yet?
favor?
Yeah, I.
Okay, it's unanimous.
Thank you,
all.
everybody. Great meeting.
Good
yeah.
night,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone. Appreciate
Thank
the
you,
questions.
Charles. Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Next week.
Yep.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.